There we go. Hey,
Yeah, we
hey.
are here. Thank you very much for joining us here on Job Seeker Nation. This week, I just noticed that I didn't change the bottom part. We're not debunking myths this week. We
You
did
know, it
that.
felt like deja
But
vu. I'm like, wait a
yeah.
minute.
No, we're not doing that this week. We are just going to be tackling some questions. I
Yeah,
haven't even gotten a name for the episode yet, so it really doesn't matter. Across from me, of course, is Jack Kelly, founder of WeCruiter.io. And some people, if you misspell it, you still get to your site. If you spell it with the E as the
yeah,
TER, it still gets to your site, which probably you got that domain just in case people misspell it, which is a very
yeah.
smart thing to do. So, because I've done that a couple of times in the past,
I
and
know. I should have
but
picked an easier name to spell, but what are you
yeah,
going to
yeah, I know, I know. I spent the first few months trying to say recruiter
do?
as
Yeah,
opposed to recruiter. So
yeah,
I now that I got that down, I'm
yeah,
pretty slick with that. But also should mention your Forbes Senior Careers Contributor, and just you put out like 3 or 4 articles a week, so it's very frequent. It's kind of like I wish Forbes would make it a little bit easier for just to get your feed
yeah.
to your articles as opposed to having to get their feed to everything else. But that's neither here nor there. New Jersey, how's New Jersey?
You know, the weather is hot, muggy, gross. I think this whole pandemic, the weather was horrible, or it
Yeah,
just feels that way. But you know, this might sound like a crazy thing to say. You got to wonder, are we are you better off having really bad weather so people stayed inside and you didn't have FOMO, like you were afraid that you missed out on stuff because
right,
the weather was so bad for most of the time. It's like, all right, what was I going to do anyway? You know, I can't go
right.
to the beach, I can't go whatever. For the most part, not so great. How about in Chicago?
Chicago is cooled down. We did
Yeah,
have what you guys are getting now. We had the 90-degree weather and the 90% humidity. Like I explained before, it's not like where I used to live in Tampa, where the humidity is always 100% during the summer, unless it just happens to get to 75 or 70. But even if it gets that, the humidity is quite high. And that's what makes it miserable. You walk outside, you go for down the block, you are sweating bullets. So if you work, it's better to bring your work clothes with you if you have to work a few blocks because of parking,
yeah.
and parking downtown isn't that all that great either. So,
So let's just make this the weather report show. Let's,
yeah, right.
let's just talk about the weather, sports,
Yes.
weather.
Yeah.
Let's change the whole format.
Yeah. Yeah. Just change it up. People going, what are they
All
talking about?
right, but you want to hear a good segue? You want to hear a really smooth segue?
Yeah,
So
go
that
for
I
it.
got to tell you, a big reason, one of the many reasons to have remote work is that when you go into a big city, you probably have the same thing in Chicago. You know, here, if you go on the train and it's August, it is just gross. It's
Yeah,
hot,
it is.
sticky. You're
Mhm.
like pushed against everybody. Their sweat is on you. It is so vile. And
Yeah.
that's like, and then you come in to the, and then you go outside, you walk in the streets, it's oppressively hot. So you're all dripping. And then think back when we all wore suits where you didn't have business casual. And then your suits are all rumpled, your shirt is rumpled, you're all wet. It's like, there has to be a better way. So
Yeah.
no one talks about that for remote work, but that's one of the many, many, many reasons why remote work should be a thing. You just don't have to endure that.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree, and that's a good reason why people would want to stay home and want to do what they do because they don't want to be bothered on the train in August or July. Now September and October,
Not so
okay,
bad, not as
it
bad,
starts to go,
right?
and not as bad,
Not as bad.
but it's the humidity. And the humidity is miserable, though New York is not quite as miserable as Chicago, I don't think. And nothing's worse than living in a southern state in a big city and having to take transportation somewhere. It's better to have your own car for that very reason, with nice cool heat, hopefully. And I hope the rest of you are cool where you're at. Please let us know in the chat. Let's get it started. Let's have some fun. And we want to answer your questions. So, really, what we talk about here is
Weather.
arbitrage to what you're dealing with, like weather, sports, sports analogies, uh, but you'll get some of everything here. We hope that you'll join us. We are live streaming to LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So be sure you look for our YouTube channel. It's hashtag Jobs Seeker Nation. Let's go ahead and, boy, we got a lot to talk about. And it's just you and I, so we can switch speeds whenever we
Sure.
want, and it's really, and I really sometimes even look forward to it, because yeah, with the guests you got to kind of be mindful, because they're going, what are they talking about?
Right. You got to be all
But
polite and everything.
you're right, right. And then we might have lost people at the weather. Who knows? But I just put some questions out there for us to discuss, and I think people, I wrote a Facebook page to kind of accompany it in a lot of ways. I think I tagged you on it. I don't know if you got a chance to see it or not, but it went on, and I gave some takes on some of the things that we've talked about and that you've talked about and that I've talked about, and I kind of combined it together in one particular thread. But really, job seekers are just kind of asking the questions: what choices you're going to have, whether you're vaccinated or you're unvaccinated. Especially if an employer wants you back in the office. And I hope that people aren't waiting for us to tell you exactly what to do. But I think that people are kind of wondering what the rest of the country is going to is looking like right now, and what we think is going to be happening in September, when a large portion of people going back to the office. So as far as you concerned, I know you've kind of tackled this
Yeah.
ad nauseum this summer. So, in your vision, if a job seeker is still kind of undecided, I mean, you can fight going back to the office if you haven't started already. A revolt in your office to find out who everybody is, and then you could just stage a front. But I don't think that's going to work in larger companies, maybe smaller companies, but really, protest. Your thoughts, Jack?
So really interesting because the way I'm seeing it playing out is companies are really starting to push the vaccines hard.
Hmm.
You know, in New York, basically they're saying they're just trying to push everybody to get the vaccinations, and if you
Hmm.
do, they say, hey, you got various kinds, the key to the city, or different things to say, hey, you can go to restaurants, bars, clubs, gyms, but if you don't, you can't go anywhere. So that's on the public sector. But with businesses, you're seeing more and more big companies saying, hey, you got to get your shots. And it really divides into two camps. I mean, you still have a lot of people who don't want to get vaccinated, and and I'm not sure how it's going to play out, because both sides are really digging in their heels in terms of the ones who say, "Hey, I my body, I can do what I want. Don't tell me what to do."
Hmm.
Um, or maybe they're concerned for health reasons or whatever that may be. So it's a big issue. One thing that really threw me for a loop, I kind of presumed all the like nurses and healthcare workers were already vaccinated, and it turns out they're not. And like a lot of them are saying, "Hey, we don't want to get vaccinated," which makes me wonder, like, what do they know that we don't know? Um,
Hospitals are mandating, and there's a
yeah,
lot of the same issues. You can't make me get
yeah,
vaccinated, blah, 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 blah. And really, I think that there's enough science that we know and that we're seeing live. If you want to call it an experiment, you can. But the people who are largely getting vaccinated, less than 1% are getting infected, as opposed to the ones that are not getting infected, or the ones that are facing a much more harsher reality when they get COVID. So I think the science is there. I think it just boggles my mind that the trust is very slow to come, and we've trusted things in the past on a whole lot less information than that. Uh, it's like,
Yeah.
we can go back to other political stands
Yeah.
and make a case for that because we trusted that. But how do vaccines become as political
See,
as voting for a
it's
president?
so frustrating because like
Yeah,
everything boils down to that. And to me, I seriously, Mark, like I don't get it. I really don't, because like I
yeah,
don't. I first of all, I don't consider myself a Democrat or Republican. I really
right.
don't. I don't belong to any party, and I purposely don't
Hmm.
because I want to look at things with a clear eye and not
Right.
feel I have to jump aboard with whatever my tribe is doing and be on there. I rather look at it analytically. Hey, what's the right thing to do? But
Right.
everything else, and it's so infuriating to me because then we can't get anything done because all we do is argue with each other instead of just trying to kind of like, let's say, all right, why don't you want to get vaccinated? Like, for instance, I'm vaccinated, my kids are, my wife, everything. Yeah,
Yeah. So are we.
but you know what? But now I don't even know because, like, now I don't know. Maybe what really threw me for a loop when you hear all the nurses aren't getting it. I'm like, wait, is this something I don't know? But anyway, it would be better if instead of politicizing, we just have open, honest conversations about it.
Yeah.
And for people who don't, you hear them out. And instead of,
Hmm.
because I think if you just chastise people and say, you have to do it, you're a bad person, that's going to make them dig in their heels and say, I'm not going to do it. So,
Well, and no telling the next thing that comes
yeah,
along, they're going to it won't we won't be able to even reason with anybody. But I think there are nurses. I have nurses in my family. They're
you
all
do, right? You have a
vaccinated.
lot of people.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
I have a lot of nurses in my family, and they're all vaccinated.
yeah,
Period. There
yeah,
wasn't even a question at first. I think people are hesitant because they have, you know, they they hear, 1% faces a chance of, and
yeah,
that possibly might be the 1%,
right.
and it's really less than 1%. Really, when you break down, that's a large number if you look at it from a large, you know, a wide spreading point of view. But ultimately, it's I couldn't make the case not to. I remember reading a study from University of Kentucky talked about what the vaccine actually went through in the trials that they actually performed, and it turned about to be correct. And based on that, I remember March when you know, February, I think is when I got vaccinated, the first one. I looked at it and said, there's no reason why I shouldn't get vaccinated. I get the flu shot every year. So, if I have the flu shot every year, getting vaccinated it was not that large of a stretch for me to do.
It's almost just if like one group says I'm going to do A, then the other group has to say I'm going to do B. It's just, and then after a while, it's just there's not even, and then you just find reasons to support why you made that decision.
Right.
And what's to me the whole big issue that's a challenge is that with everybody fighting each other and not trusting the government, the health officials, it's hard to get stuff done. So then you talk about the Delta variant, and all these companies now are pushing back the return to work, which for some people could be good because, like, hey, I don't want to go back to an office.
Yeah.
For others who may want to go back, it's okay. But after a while, I get concerned that we can kind of go off the rails because we can't agree on anything, and then things spiral because you
Yeah.
start wondering, hey, all right, is this Delta variant really bad, or is it, or would the media is just saying it's so bad to make people get their vaccines?
Yeah, I really think though we're getting to an age now. I think people are going to start looking at other areas other than the vaccine and really consider their values as a part of the reason why they'll want to work for a company, which is going to mean for a lot of people who've never done this, but they're going to actually have to research a company to see if how do they feel about vaccinations. How did they feel about certain issues? Did they comply? Did they wrestle with it? Did they have a bunch of faux pas and then they got together, or did they have together to begin with? There's a lot of things I think a lot of people are going to start considering right now for to work with an employer. I think one of the choices is going to be how did they respond to this pandemic? Did they require shots? Does that align with what I believe? And it's going to be, well, those who do and those who don't. And people who don't believe in the vaccine are going to start looking at, okay, how did they respond, and did they speak out, and did they was anti whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think though that's going to morph into, people are going to start scrutinizing the companies they work with a little bit more
Without a doubt,
than they
I
have in the
agree.
past. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because you see this where, especially, I've noticed it more. I'm a Gen X, but I've noticed it much more for sure with the Gen Zs, the
Hmm.
21 to 25 year olds,
Right.
if I'm correct about
Right.
that. And then, some of the younger millennials where they're basing, is exactly what you're saying, their decisions, not just on the vaccines, but in addition to that, how do they react to different social and political issues?
Hmm.
And they want to align themselves with companies that share the same values. And that's a really interesting trend that,
Yeah.
like, I know, when I started working, that wasn't, I couldn't even imagine that. That didn't seem, that wasn't even a thought. But now you're right. It's a big thing where you start looking, hey, how do you look at this issue? How do you look at that other issue? Whether it's, vaccines, whether you name it. and
Yeah.
and and I think that's going to be a way that for companies to kind of build an identity and to kind of maybe get the talent that they want by saying, hey, join us, this is what we're all about.
Yeah, I think too is there's this underlining feeling that maybe the vaccines has kind of been that virtual, if you will, line in the sand between those who have and those who haven't
Yeah.
and have not, those who do and those who do not. And people are starting. I noticed that a lot of my recent connections on Twitter is a lot like that, because when somebody connects with me, if they're not a fake avatar, I go and look
Yeah.
and to see, who that person is, especially if they're in the areas that we're in: career, job search, HR, talent acquisition, whatever you want to call it. And you look down, and I'm going, huh, our values kind of align, because I
Mhm.
could see the alliances kind of line up. And I think that's what people are. This I'm thinking maybe they're starting to be like me in that sense, that I want to know who you are before I start really connecting you. Those people with numbers, they don't care who they are. I don't care about the numbers, but I want to know who my content's going to be in front of.
Mhm.
And maybe it's just me, but I'm I'm not discriminating, but I am pretty judicious in who I'm connecting with, and because I want what I say to resonate for that message, not the political side of it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if we're going to be able to have that
Yeah.
choice.
See, yeah, I like following people who have all sorts of different opinions and different
I do
ideas
too.
because it
I do
makes it
too.
interesting, even if it even if what they do or say boils my blood sometimes when you look at it, my
Yeah,
blood pressure goes up. But it's
it's
kind of
hard.
cool to see, oh, all right, because then sometimes you hear things or read things or see things, you're like, huh. It makes you kind of question your own viewpoint on it. So that's, so it's kind of neat to get all that, that kind of
It's good to
variety.
have
Yeah.
that. It's good to have that,
Yeah.
but then I don't want a message that has no intention being politicized and being polarized because one person is making a bigger deal than everybody else is, and that becomes, I go, sure, we can play block them, but I don't try to have. You don't want to have to do that. You don't want to have to ignore people either, but I like to ask other questions, and I don't want you to take it personally. And I think that's where
Yeah.
we kind of, you know, everything's being is so personal now
Yeah.
that you're almost like you're having to choose battles and you're not even trying to battle.
Yeah. It's to me, it's so sad because it takes all the oxygen out of the room, whether it's on Twitter or whatever social
Hmm.
media platform, because everybody's going on their side and fighting each other instead of let's talk about like other important things without arguing and fighting. But I guess it's pretty naive because it's not set up to do that.
Right, right. So if you're deciding what that's going to look like for you, you've got to be able to. If you're, a lot of it depends. If you're a job seeker is looking for a new job, you haven't decided what industry you're going to be in. You're going to have to make some choices early on. It's better to make some choices early on who you're going to pursue based on. Perhaps it is going to be your best, or perhaps you don't care either way. Um, you're still going to be asked about how you're responding as a job seeker to, this particular climate, having to answer the questions, and you've got to be direct about how you've been handling it. If you've
You
been
know,
sitting on the sidelines, it might be
yeah.
tough for you because they're interested in hearing how you are learning about their industry and what you know about their industry and why you want to be a part of it.
It's interesting. I don't know if you've heard, but I haven't really heard, anecdotally about any candidates or hiring managers kind of
Hmm.
delving into or trying to kind of see, hey, are you vaccinated? What do you feel about this? What do you feel about that? So it's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Because
And
I
I
think if it
wonder
happened,
what
they would
it.
complain and tell me. You know what I mean? Because that's the kind of something. Say, Jack, I went on this interview and this is what they said. They were, they didn't want to choose me because I'm filling the gap. But I haven't really heard those kind of things, which I guess is good.
But what you're hearing though is that we either require you to be vaccinated or not.
Yeah,
Is
that's
where
true.
they're drawing the line,
Yeah,
and as you reported, as if I remember correctly, um, in one of your articles, that it is that HR departments own the right to require vaccination to return to work or be a part of the company. What people are responding to is for the fact that they're having to be mandated, and it feels like it's being infringed on their rights. But really, the employer, that wants to have that want make people feel safe. And I'm not saying whether they don't. If they don't require, it makes them feel safe. But for the most part, we're assuming that if you're requiring vaccinations, you're concerned about safety for people to come back in the office. Um, Not to add in boosters quite yet, but all in all, that's all we know. Everything else has kind of been up for grabs and split down the middle.
yeah. You got to wonder if they're going to keep pushing back the return to work because that phrase is weird because people are working anyway, so it's not like they're not working. But just for the sake of that's what
Return
people
to
call
office.
refer to, right? So I wonder if it's going to kind of keep pushing that back return to the office because it is wrestling this because you do have the people who say I don't want to get vaccinated. Then what do you do? Let's say you have an A+ player. It's easy to say we
Mhm.
want everyone vaccinated, but like, hey, I don't want to lose Mark. What are we
Right.
going to do? All right, we can bring him in, but you have to get tested. But then you're going to have the other people, another A player saying, "Whoa, I don't want anyone in who hasn't got their shots." And and then what does the company do? It gets really dicey.
Well, it's interesting what they'll decide who an A player is. I
Yeah,
mean, suppose you were not that guy in the office, but when you went virtual, you went crazy. But you're not known. Yeah,
yeah,
you're not known. So if you're not known,
yeah,
is it fair to bring in that person that has been traditionally known as the high performer? Or
yeah,
how about the person that thrived while they're at home? They were able to escalate their performance. So many questions that we probably won't be able to dissect
yeah.
in this particular hour. But
Would you ever
um,
thought? Would you ever thought in your wildest dreams that one day these are the things you're going to talk about? Like it just we're
we
used to it
could
now, but
make
it just
this
really
up.
blows your mind when you think
Yeah.
about here we are. This is what what's going on? It's just it's
But
hard to fathom.
it's hard to fathom, but the timing was probably perfect because that's just another discussion to kind of uh, divide the haves and the have-nots and the would-nots uh, in that particular sense. So, and to some degree, I don't know if the would-nots have mingled with the woods in that kind of way, but yeah, I think that's what makes this discussion very interesting. That the politics came in and made it in such a way
Mm.
that we are now officially different in the way that we look at our
Yeah.
country and the way that what we're willing to sacrifice in order to make a stand and to hold our rights. In the meantime, there's another war possibly pending. Who knows what that's going to all bring about? So, if you want to add anything else, we can go on to
So
the
yeah,
next
yeah.
topic.
Otherwise, yeah, we'll get stuck in this because it is. It's just it's one of these things
Yeah,
that yeah, they keep going on
yeah,
about.
yeah. So, and I think we discussed part of this too, in the fact that the anti-masking requirement would change your plan to work remotely. But I think an even more fair question is, how do I practically find these remote jobs that people that where there's no argument, where there's no doubt in connecting with an employer, and if everybody's remote, that's where I want to work, or whether I want to connect with an employer that is going back into the office. So how do people connect with those particular opportunities? And I think one of the things we'll have to kind of even talk about is for the fact that if people are not ready, it doesn't matter where you're going to be working, you're not going to get the job because you're not ready. And to me, people have had plenty of time, you would think, to get ready to work in the office, or whether they don't want to work out, but basically they want to work. And I'm wondering if all the other distractions are keep going to keep people from getting a job or getting interviews.
I think it does. Yeah, because I could see where in fact, if I was able to chart it, I definitely
Hmm.
saw this, Mark, where let's put aside like the beginning of the pandemic and up
Right,
until let's say 6 months. I'm picking arbitrary dates, 6 months
right,
ago, or let's even say to
right.
January, right? Where all of a sudden, then I started seeing it pick up, and you could. And listen, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on it. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist, anything like that,
Hmm.
but just an observer. But I definitely felt that once the vaccines were rolling out, if you would graph it, you would see like the job market picking up, picking up, picking up, picking up, picking up. You know what I mean? Kept growing.
Hmm.
Then and looking great, great, great. And then once the Delta variant started, you could see it kind of trailing down. Not free fall, but
Right.
you just felt the difference. So
Hmm.
like as you're talking about, yeah, you got to wonder if it's like the Delta. Then I heard about this Lambda thing that you have to worry about. So it
Hmm.
just whenever there's friction, I've noticed it's easier for companies not to hire and just to either just keep interviewing or hold off the interviews or do hiring
Hmm.
freezes or even downsizing because they're afraid. So I think with things like the Delta, whether it's as bad as they say or it's not as bad, just the idea of it makes people think twice. So it makes job seekers say, "Hey, I don't want to go back in, to an office and commute in public transportation where the vaccines aren't as great as we thought they were. So maybe I can get it. Maybe I'll spread it. Maybe I'll take it home with me and give it to my family." So it's easy for people to say, I'm not going to, I just want to stay remote. And then for companies, they're going to like, what are we going to do? We're getting a revolt on our hand. So
Yeah.
it's, I could see this playing out for a while.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate because really, what we tell job seekers really, you've got to have a clear focus. Yeah, you've got to be very clear
Yeah.
about where you want to apply and what job you want, and you work towards that. You're going to work towards that by not just the application process, but who you're going to connect with and of course who you're going to connect with, and at the companies you hopefully will target will help you understand what is actually going on the inside. And you may have to be present in those conversations for a while in order for you to make a final decision, whether you want to pursue that particular company or not.
Yeah.
People are really people may be hanging on saying that, yeah, I really want to work with this company, but they are obviously the channels are delaying the process
Yeah.
because they're still deciding who and how and what they're going to pick, which means that the company that is the most clear in what they want and how they want it and how they're working and then what they're going to be able to tell people. They're the ones that are going to forge ahead. I don't see Amazon's going to have that problem. Google's not having that problem. Microsoft has made it clear how they're going across. And you would think other companies would copy that, but a lot of companies have been pretty slow in stating what exactly they're going to do. Is that
Yeah.
what you're looking at too?
Yeah, and I think I'll go back to something that is your mantra that you always say about, that you constantly have to be on the lookout in
Yeah.
terms of the job search,
Yeah.
and because it gets too easy for people to say, "All right, I'm not going to look because COVID. Oh, well, now I'm not going to look for the Delta variant. Now I'm not going to look for whatever," and then it gets really clunky because you're starting, stopping, starting, stopping. So I would
Hmm.
say, despite when we're talking about these things, I think will bring up issues, but that doesn't mean you stop doing what you're doing. It's just so you
Right.
kind of know. So if maybe you don't get that interview or the interview process takes longer, it's like, oh, I get why, because I heard Mark and Jack talking about all this stuff. Okay, but you still keep going on. It could
Right.
take a little longer. It could be more starts and stops. It could be more not hearing back, but you kind of keep doing it because eventually you'll click in, and you want to while other people, and this is gonna sound cold blooded, but then when
Hmm.
others start just saying, you know what, peace out, I'm not gonna keep doing this. Well, it lessens the competition. So then you actually, if you could just endure, and keep going, you're gonna have a better chance of getting the jobs you want because you have less competition who are pulling themselves out of the market.
Yeah, and one of the things I hope job seekers realize is that you're going to have to be able to juggle several different companies that are moving forward with their hiring process. In other words, if you rely on one and one decides to stop, then you have to kind of start over instead of having a number of balls in the air.
Yeah.
And you're gonna you should be trying to get several different interviews with several different companies, and especially now because the hiring process is going to start and stop. You may have 4 interviews in 2 weeks, or you might have one interview in 4 weeks. You just don't
Yeah.
know what that's going to look like. But all in all, to be better prepared, you've got to be ready for the long term, which means once you get into a company, you have first couple of interviews, you should be having a couple of other interviews right behind that. And that's why we always say it's better to target the companies, because applying online, you're going to be waiting a long
Yeah.
time. It's not going to be funny.
So it's interesting, for people who are watching now, watch it later. Yeah. In my opinion, what's happening, we always talk about the job market like it's just one big thing that we're all participating in. But really, what happens is that it breaks down to smaller sections, and everything is a little different. Like, for
Yes,
instance,
sir.
let's say, like in the restaurant and the hospitality, that area was just so decimated during the pandemic. But then
Hmm.
once, like, we switched, put on the switch, and like, okay, we can open up, boom, there's just enormous needs. So that, we've all heard about the great resignation. So let's say you're a bartender, a waiter, or a waitress, and you're not feeling the love, you could just say, I'm going to quit and go somewhere else because there's just such a big need.
Right.
And then I
Right.
think it gives people a false impression, though, because then they think, oh, okay, this is what's going on. But then it makes them feel bad because, like, wait, why am I not getting this traction? Why am I not getting multiple offers or, multiple interview channels? Because I think what I see is that it really depends on what area you're in and how hot your area is in. You could be, as I mentioned, let's say you're a waiter or waitress and you're in a place with lots of bars and restaurants, yeah, you have your choice. They're going to fight for
Hmm.
you. They're going to give you, if you're Walmart, if you're Target, they're actually paying for your college. It's insane to to
Yes.
to because they need the talent that they're going to do that. But then other areas, like I got to tell you, I get lots of job orders where it's it's just really hard to find people. And even then,
Hmm.
when you find it, you would think they would say, "Oh my God, you found someone. Let's give them a lot of money." They're like, "Meh, let's keep looking." So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's real, and I'm being transparent. I love to say, "Hey, we're placing everybody we talk to," but no, it's odd. So like in certain areas, it's like they didn't get the memo, or they don't care as much. They could say, "Hey, you know what? We'll survive without that extra help, and we're going to keep looking till we can find the cheapest person and pay them the least." But they're okay. So if you're kind of doing the search, don't get disappointed or discouraged. If you're not getting
Hmm.
interviews, you're not getting callback, because it's not one size fits all. This is, some areas really hot, really great, others not so much. Some are like cold. So, and I feel that's important to bring out, Mark, because it's so
Hmm.
easy for someone's psyche just to
Yes, it
see, and
is.
you lose your self-respect and your self-esteem, because you're like, wait, it's supposed to be so hot and not, I'm getting ignored. And this,
Hmm.
yeah, maybe in your particular space, it's just not happening.
Yeah, maybe, and I would like to hear from people who are
Yeah.
watching, and please chat it up. What are you experiencing? What's going on in your company? And maybe you've read the tea leaves in your company that maybe there is some, there's some attrition issues that are going on, and maybe there's some turnover that's happening, but we're not hearing about what the plans are to
Yeah.
hire in the future. We'd love to know where you're at, or maybe there's a hiring spree in your company that people will need to know. This will help out the other people who are looking, and that's why we're asking for you to at least give us a shout in the chat and tell us what you see, what you're doing, what you're hearing from your friends. That would be very good. And there's 2 points I want to make that I think that are really important. I think has to do with the future of work, and that it has to do with the future of hiring. One, Google and a lot of other companies like it are starting to rethink how they're going to search talent for the future now. Not they're not waiting till all of this is over. They're thinking that we're going to have to think like in a college basketball coach and organization. A lot of these kids are getting uh, drafted a whole lot earlier than their senior year. They're getting some of them are getting drafted and getting promises and getting courted starting their freshman year. And if they played AAU basketball, like during the summers and stuff, maybe even eighth grade. I've heard one being getting courted as early as seventh grade. With all having said that, that there are some companies who are going to build their own pipeline so that they can just bring on the next man up, so to speak, or the next woman up when it comes to work and training for their field and training for what their needs are. And when you're a large enough company for Google, it's going to be you working for Google will make you attractive to the other large companies, or maybe to some of the other small startups that might be upcoming in the sense of this you appeal to the smaller companies who in those particular needs. But there are companies that are going to look they're looking at the future now, how they're going to get talent and have their own pipeline, so that they don't have to depend on applicants and getting a bunch of unqualified leads and recruiting and rely on recruiting to get the job done and to find the right talent in those unknown places, and for them to look at the person that has their head down and doing great work. They're going to have their own, and it's much easier to tap, and probably it will save a whole bunch of money in the long term because of the how much it costs to interview and to onboard somebody who just came out from the street. But I think the way that hiring is beginning to change, I think it's going to address those issues.
That's really interesting. I wasn't aware of that. So like with the Google, they'll kind of seek out people who are maybe, you know, before they finish up college, And the same way scouts would look for the next talent for the NBA, they're looking for the next talent to join them and not wait for them to graduate, but kind of start scouting them. That's so
Or
interesting.
yeah, and there's a case where, and I was talking to my friend Dr. Antonio Boyd, who is executive vice president of Future of School, and he was sharing with me how there's even in the healthcare industry, there was one particular instance he knew that there was a high school that was already on the campus of a hospital organization, a healthcare organization. So, can you imagine already those kids are being groomed and placed in a place where they're heavily influenced by their surroundings? So,
Yeah.
that that doesn't promise that they're going to go into healthcare, but that definitely influences the fact that they have all that contact and would be able to connect with the kids that are sharp. So they're not just waiting to go to college; they can go out of come right out of high school and maybe get a technical degree that will, like a x-ray technician, that will pay them 60,000 plus a year if they just work one job. If they work two jobs, they can make a whole lot more, a whole lot faster. But I think companies are thinking, okay, we maybe some of this large space we won't be able to use for the workers, but we could definitely use it to do some other things, and that might be one of the ways they're doing. In fact, it's already started that people are thinking about the large part of their future and
Hmm.
how they're going to get talent. And so when we kind of run across another pandemic, or let's say there is, some other forces that come into play, that you can change and be flexible, and you can still meet your business needs by getting the right talent in the right place at the right time.
That's a really wild thing to see that. I wonder too. You're going to start seeing more to follow that thread that some of these big companies might say, "Hey, do you really need to have that college degree? If you have that aptitude at an early age,
Hmm.
it'd be like the old fashioned, like you said, apprenticeships where you come in and let's say you want to be a software developer, software engineer, or what have you. Hey, you have this raw talent. Yeah, if you want to go to school for 4 years and do everything, but we could help, get you just up and running right away. It's like bypassing, college basketball and going right into the pros. I don't know. I wonder if that's some of these things might start happening, moving forward. That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, I think people are going to think long. Some companies that are able to, that will keep their eye on the ball, are going to keep that in mind, that those opportunities have all the potential in the world. That if we got ahead of the game, we can make a difference right away. And make a difference in a way that really doesn't cost them a lot of money, and put a lot of forethought. And just imagine if if you're a high school on Google campus, what's going to influence your what's going to influence your ability to learn, is for the fact that the company wants you to be
Mhm.
ready to learn certain types of coding, or strategies, or things, something that serves them. So really, it's the company that's influencing. It's not the Department of Education, which would become a very interesting
Mhm.
um thing here. But yeah, so I think the future is now. The incubator and the embryo has been inserted, so to speak, of how people are going to look at the future of hiring and the future of job search. Tina has an interesting comment. She says a lot of companies. Let me get it up. I thought, okay, a lot of companies are looking for employees with virtual sales experience. I've been out of work since the pandemic. How do I get this experience to compete with people who have virtual experience? So I guess what she's meaning is that people have been able to do it working remotely, sales. And that's a very interesting conversation to have. Jack, your area, it has a lot to do with sales.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, So maybe you might be the best qualified to lead that
Yeah,
off.
I would imagine if you're interested in that space, that's probably where a lot of action is going. I could just speak from the recruiting side, but at this point, it really is all virtual. I haven't met a candidate physically face to face or a hiring manager face to face since before the pandemic, and
Mhm.
so it's all whether Zoom calls or Microsoft Team or whatever, or just old school phone calls. Um, so if you're looking for a role in that space, I always see lots of roles for salespeople because it's one of those professions, one of those jobs where a lot of people hear sales and they feel it's icky. They don't feel comfortable. They feel like you're going to be that used car salesperson cliche.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of money to be made if you're a good salesperson. If you're a good salesperson, you can make way more money than a lot of the big shots at the company because you're bringing in the revenue. And then when you bring in the
Mhm.
revenue, not only are you making money, but you're that person because
Mhm.
the others, they're a cost center. Let's say they're not bringing revenue, you are, so you get a bigger voice at the table. So
Sure.
I would look into it if now I don't know how it works when you're just breaking into something for virtual sales, how people would
Mhm.
train you, but I imagine big organizations have over the last year and a half now shifted. Give it like one example. Maybe I heard on the show. I can't recall, Mark, but it used to be brokers, stockbrokers, would call up, hey, Mr. Dyson, I want to tell you about this stock or whatever. Now they're saying, hey, don't do that. Hit people up on LinkedIn. So they'll
Mm.
try to, I guess, look at profiles that they feel, this person looks like they're well to do. Let me introduce myself. So that's kind of a virtual sales. So now that I'm kind of thinking out loud, I would imagine a lot of companies over the last year and a half now have changed their business model online. So that could give you a lot of other opportunities.
Yeah. I would say that if you can position yourself to be an apprentice, even if it's just for a short period of time, maybe that might be something you can do where you can shadow somebody who actually does it and to see how they do it. And then maybe you can start to imagine or reimagine what that will look like in specific industries. So let's say you know someone that does it, you know someone who does it online. A great way is to just find information and be able to just pull them outside of LinkedIn, pull them offline, Zoom call, send them a Starbucks $5, $10 gift certificate via email and just say, hey, can we spend a few minutes? I'd like to learn about what you do. Find out how they got that experience. And maybe a lot of it might have been because they were forced to do it and that they had to pivot online and follow the company's protocols. And if you're able to be that flexible, perhaps you might be able to have opportunity to make yourself that flexible. There might
Yeah.
be some volunteer opportunities with nonprofit organizations. Maybe they're looking for someone, and many times they don't know. They know they want someone, but they don't know exactly how they're going to do it. Maybe it won't be hard. It won't be the commission you would like. Maybe you won't be commissioned at all, but at least you'll be able to get a feel for it. You'll probably have to dip into a few pools, be able to
Yeah.
get wet, so to speak, with the right type of experience. So
Yeah.
when you get to an interview, you can speak to it.
And I would say this, Tina, I would find something that you care about and you're interested in it.
Mm,
Because if you try to sell something and you really don't have any passion for it, or you don't believe in the product or service, can you do it? Yeah, but it'll be really hard to be like the
yeah,
best at it. So you want to
right.
find something where it just resonates with you, whatever it might be, whether it's a car, whether it's selling, securities, insurance, whatever. But if you feel like, wow, I really love this product, this clothing line, whatever it may be, then you can go all in because then when you're talking to people and selling, you're not really selling. You kind of believe in it. So you're just telling them, hey, this is why I believe it, why I think it's so great. So in addition to everything Mark was saying, which I agree with wholeheartedly, I would choose an area, if you can, that you feel comfortable with, you like the product, you like the service, you believe in it. because then you could be honest, and people could tell. You know what I mean? Like when you speak to people and they're
Hmm.
trying to sell you on something, you can tell if they really believe in it or they're just full of it.
Hmm. Yep. Tina says their passion is selling pharmaceuticals.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
there's a lot. There's probably a lot of
so
needs. Yeah.
So you're looking at a lot of companies that sell pharmaceuticals, and you'll have to know how they work, what type of commission, what's changed and what hasn't changed,
Oh,
what it
right.
looks
Because it used to
like.
be you would have to go into the doctor's office. So I bet that's what
Yes,
she's talking
yes.
about, where you're used
So
to coming in and speaking to the doctor,
right.
and now you don't do that. So how do you? All right, I got you.
Doctors,
Yeah.
hospitals,
Yeah.
all of those, and there's a wide variety. It may be pharmacies, but I think you'll have to start to do your homework in a very
Yeah.
deep way, because although if you've had sales experience in pharmaceuticals, then you're halfway there.
Yeah.
You can speak to having to that. You want to know how people are working, so you want to start. I would use LinkedIn to connect with all those people who do pharmaceuticals for the large lab companies. Let's say if you want to go for to work with companies that might be aligned with, let's say, Abbott Labs, which is really, really a huge pharmaceutical, or Merck, or some of the other ones that are largely involved in pharmaceuticals, and to find out about how they work and how they've changed through the pandemic. And if you want to thrive, what does that look like in that particular area? Jack, do you have anything you want to
That's
add?
good advice. Absolutely. Absolutely. And
Yeah,
I can see
yeah.
why I would imagine these big pharmaceutical companies, like you said, Merck or Schering Plow, whatever, they've probably adjusted how they do
Hmm.
things. So I'd imagine it's not the old, hey, can I speak to the doctor? And we all see that when you're in the doctor, they come in with their bags and they're trying
Right.
to get in front of them. So I imagine they kind of change, maybe not, but I imagine they have to change, they change their style.
Yeah, yeah. If you want to change to any industry, you need to talk to 50 to 100 people in that industry if you really want to get a solid way. And I'm throwing a number out there. There's no science to it. It may not be that many people, but you should start making a good core of your network and people in that industry, so you can see what they're updating, what their concerns are, what they look towards the future. Is it something that you may want to be interested only for a short period of time to go somewhere else? Are people trending upwards into other fields that might be of interest? What's considered a move up? What's considered a lateral move? And Tina says they have 28 years face to face. So
Wow.
now you've got to see how have people, you're not the only one. Um, at the same time, you probably don't want to lead with the 28 years of experience, because then people will think, oh, he's at least 45 to 50 years old. So therefore, the age factor might become an obstacle more than anything else. It's good for us to know that, because now we know, but we're not hiring you. I'm just saying you don't want to lead with that, Tina. So just try to be very judicious in who and how you tell that. And maybe instead of putting all that 28 years, I don't know what your LinkedIn profile looks like. Maybe you want to put it towards the last 10 years or the last 15 years, so that people won't get, crossed up in what your experience, whether it translates to this particular world, because everything, you got to consider be ready for everything to be virtual. And the way that you communicate and the way that you transact business, everything is going to be from the other side of your laptop. So that's something we need to consider. The other thing I think that people will need to understand too is that the people who are already in those fields, who are thriving in those fields, are also connected to other people who are thriving in those fields. So when you get a hold of one person, ask for introductions. so that there'll be warm introductions, so that there'll be a better way of connecting. So you get to know the person who knows the person who knows the person, go down that line. If you can go into a company, let's say you do like Abbott Laboratories or some of the other large pharmaceutical companies, and you get a hold of one person,
Mhm.
try to get as deep as you can in that company as far as referrals, because the more information you have about the company and how they work, the better you'll be able to use it, and the more people who will look out for you, um, will be useful to you in you getting in that company. And there are studies that show that should you, the more the people you get referred to, and you're successfully in get hired by a company, the longer you're likely to stay with that company. I don't know how that's going to translate into the new world, but that study was actually done a few
Mhm.
years ago. I don't know if that's going to say, but my bet is that will still be the case, because then you'll have a support system. Just imagine walking through your onboarding, and you already know five, six, seven people who will come by and check on you, or at least be able to Zoom with you, or you'll go to an in-person meeting. You know a bunch of people already. That has an impact on people all around you, saying that, oh, he's connected already, and that's impressive to um, managers.
It's interesting. Kind of brings up something else too, where, and this is what's kind of exciting about this whole phase we're in, is that things are changing and you can kind of take advantage of how things work. So, for instance,
Hmm.
what Tina made me think about with J.P. Morgan, Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO, he is definitely a proponent of getting people back into the office, getting into the office setting, and so on.
Hmm.
And one of the reasons, and then also he was complaining that some of it, just dial it back maybe a few months, one of his competitor, they lost some deal because the competitors got on a plane, went out, met with the folks, and got the deal done. And I think the message to his folks is that, hey, listen, if you want to do business and make things happen, maybe you got to get out there and meet people. So even though it does feel like everything is virtual, there's
Hmm.
definitely places and people who are saying, you know what, while you're doing virtual, we're going to go out and we're going to meet people and go out to eat and take them out to dinner and what have you, or fly to their
Hmm.
offices. Now, some people may not want that for the obvious reasons, like we talked about earlier during the show. Others might say, you know what, I'm not, I'm vaxxed. I don't care. I'll wear my mask. I'll take the risk because I think, hey, while my competition is virtual, I'm going to go out and meet them face to face, and I'm going to make a difference. And maybe they'll notice me more, and maybe I'll be more successful because I'm going to get in front of them. So it's I think in terms of the job search and navigating your career, a lot of it now is going to be kind of figuring out how everything is playing out, and then how
Hmm.
can you benefit from it? How can you see, given your skills, given your talent, given your experience, what do you have, and how you could kind of maybe make it work for you? And and I think those are the people who could be successful because they're not going to just say, okay, it's business as usual, just like we used to say pre-COVID. Just now it's like, oh, let's think outside the box. How can I
Right.
get noticed? How can I get attention? And it might be like Jamie Dimon was saying, hey, get out and meet your clients or meet the new client or people you want to be your clients and make it happen.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. There's so much to parse right now.
Yeah.
I know one of the things we should look at in the next couple of weeks, and I had it here and we didn't get to it, is what will Christmas actually look like? Because traditionally, Christmas is the fall is a hiring season from October, uh, on,
That's
and there's lots of hiring in many different industries. What would that look like? I mean, we had the fact that maybe the Great Resignation was going to be that time that looks like Christmas, until we found out companies were taking 14 interviews for to get one candidate. So that I don't know if that's going to be able to happen like that in the retail industry. But is the retail industry going to start paying a little bit more so they can attract more talent? And maybe people who will have to take a bridge job by taking a Christmas job. Lots to parse
yeah.
here. We've come to the top of the hour. You got anything going on that the people should know about?
What do I have going on? Just working. It's very boring. I have a very boring life, Mark.
Mm,
I'm just I've just been kind of writing, recruiting, that
yeah,
kind of stuff.
yeah.
So nothing that that's it, man. How about yourself?
Got a few underground things going on, but in an hour, I'm going to be doing the same thing I did last week, interviewing Luke Whitbourne, who is a top staffing and research
Cool.
guy that actually we're talking a lot about networking. Way he approaches job search, where a lot of people should, is that he's learned to talk to the top guy and get referred down into the job, and he's landed a number of positions that way. And I've known him for about 6 7 years now, and I've seen him recycle that success over and over. So we're going to talk a little bit deeply
Great.
about that.
Excellent.
Then we've got Sharon Smith Akinsea, who wrote a book called Colorful. I've mentioned that in the speech. We both ended up in Forbes. That was something really special. So we get to talk about diversity in hiring and how a lot of this, what we talked about, will play into finding diverse candidates. And then my old friend Mark Babbitt is wrote a book that that everybody should be reading. We'll talk about his book exclusively. And he's been in the recruiting and the job search space for many years. If you want to check him out and his work, you follow Mark S. Babbitt on social channels, especially on LinkedIn. You don't want to miss those 3 interviews. Be happening in about an hour. So
That's a lot of talking, my friend.
yeah, I know.
A lot.
I know. I'm putting to myself punishment. But there's a strategy behind it. That's the
Yeah.
key. But in the
Yeah.
meantime, thank you very much for
Excellent.
joining us here on the hashtag Job Seeker Nation. We hope you come back next week. We got guests for the next few weeks, so that's going to be a lot of fun. We'll announce that on LinkedIn. If you look for my posts here coming on Saturday or Sunday, you'll see that and you'll want to tune in. Thanks, Jack, for another
Excellent. It's
great
good seeing you.
episode.
Thanks.
And always good talking to you, seeing you. We got to get more chat
Great.
time together outside
Absolutely.
of this. Thank you
Excellent.
very much. You
Take
all have
care.
a great week, and join me in about an hour on my page, and you'll
I'll
be
see you.
able to
I'll
enjoy it.
watch you later. Take care, my
Yeah,
friend.
take
All
care.
right.
You
Take
all
care.
have a good one. Peace
Thank you,
and God.
everyone.